Hi everyone, and a happy Victober to you. I am here for the next in my top 10 Victorian novel series. I am doing in honor of Victober, and I'm going to be talking about R.D. Blackmore's Lorna Doone. This is one I was simply compelled to read last year because I had seen the miniseries years ago, and I loved the very different setting. It is a Victorian novel, but it's a historical setting. It's set in 17th century England, and so I love that kind of that. It seems more romantic, almost more fairy tale like, more magical, just being set farther back in the past. If I had to categorize this, I would say it is historical romance. That is not to say that the men out there that are watching this, that you cannot read this, because we all know that you shouldn't just go off like marketing of books. And apparently, like in a Yale list of favorite books by the male students in the early 1900s, Lorna Doone was one of the top books that they picked because it's awesome. That's why. So yes, Lorna Doone is narrated by the main character, John Ridd, and you get to know John Ridd in and out. You get to know him so well. He tells you his life story from these couple of years. He gives you kind of some snippets from his childhood, but then you're getting current day with him and kind of all of the happenings. And he ends up having a happenstance meeting with Lorna Doone and is just utterly enamored and swept off his feet from the moment he lays eyes on Lorna Doone. If you are looking for a story with a well-rounded female character, this is not it. She is very like, I'm pretty, I'm meek, not much personality to her. So she is like the Victorian ideal of a woman, but not interesting at all. But you still do have I still had a fair amount of affection for her, but I was a little bit like fed up with how one-dimensional she was. You see him grow from boy to man in this story, and like I said, you hear his inner dialogue, and so everything he's thinking, his inner feelings. That does mean, though, it being narrated by him so much, is you aren't going to get as complete a picture of the other characters, his sisters, his parents, Lorna, the Doone family. You're not going to get to know them as well. It's written in the pastoral tradition, meaning you can see kind of the relationship between characters and the changing of the seasons and the nature and their the outward cycle of the seasons. Another Victorian author who's so well known for this is Thomas Hardy, where the nature of the landscape is almost its own character. It's just so powerful. And like I said, it's set in 17th century England, so I think R.D. Blackmore is very nostalgic about that, and kind of he just kind of idealized it. And even though he didn't live in 17th century England, I think maybe he had just read about it so much and knew about it, and so he just kind of thought it was this ideal setting for a story. And of course, it does make sense too that Victorian authors would want to set things in the past because there was so much industrialization. The Industrial Revolution was happening during the Victorian era, so kind of this picturesque, gentle story set in the past is really interesting. And then one thing I read said that this is a historical romance, and historical romances were actually very popular with Victorians at the time. So I find that really fascinating. It makes me want to check out and find out about more historical romances written during the Victorian era. And so like I said, it was, popular because all these changes were happening. So it seemed really neat to read this book of yesteryear. This is a forest setting. And so it really gives it this fairy tale-ish and enchanted feeling. Even though this is set a lot later than Robin Hood, it did make me think of Robin Hood as well. Another thing about this is it being a classic. The prose in this story is phenomenal. The language is so rich, and he has these beautiful passages describing nature and really zoning in on specific moments and making you feel like you're there and making these moments come alive. And also there's just, it's written in dialect at some points, and there's so many cultural references. It's just very, very rich. It has so many sensory details. This one, it says, "We drew our horses up and listened through the thickness of the air and with our hands laid to our ears. At first there was nothing to hear except the panting of the horses and the trickle of the evening drops from our head covers and clothing and the soft sounds of the lonely night that make us feel and try not to think." Just so evocative and really beautiful, and to me, you know, stands out from other Victorian classics that I had read. Since John is narrating this, what I love about it is you're getting things like, I'm in love with Lorna. There's lots of adventure and betrayal that's happening in that, so I don't want to give any spoilers, but he'll, you know, talk about how he's going to hunt this person down or whatever. And then in the next sentence, talk about how he's hungry for a hot mutton pasty. So it's just really great. You really do feel like you're hearing from a real person. And I just love that about it so much. It definitely is, like I said, an adventure tale, because the Doones are this family that have been banished from this land that they used to own because of their really reprehensible behavior, and they're very not okay with that. So there is just a fair amount of like political intrigue in this, and really nice different settings of the story. I like there's the beginning part where John is like just a boy, and then eventually when he's getting to see Lorna a lot more, and then eventually there are some parts all the way in London. They travel all the way to London. So I really appreciate kind of the pacing of this. It is a longer one. It's almost 700 pages, but honestly it didn't feel like it. So I do highly recommend the audiobook. That's what I listened to. I cross-stitched while I listened to the audiobook, and it was fabulous. So yes, I really recommend Lorna Doone, one of my favorite Victorian classics. I hope I have convinced someone out there to read it, and I will see you guys for another bookish video soon. Bye.